Very much for joining me. I'm sure that music is going to cause trouble, so I'm just going to go like this and go like this and then bring this back up again underneath. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm a human just like you. This is Gigaohm Biological. See you on YouTube now as well. Anyway, are we there now? Do you see it there, Christy? It's May 5th, 2024, and this is Gigaohm Biological. Not yet live. It's got to be. I see it there now. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, good night, wherever you are. Hello, welcome to Gigaohm Biological, a high-resistance, low-noise information brief brought to you by a biologist. My name's JJCouey. I'm coming to you live from my garage in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. It is 10:43 Eastern Daylight Time, and it's another show. We're trying to do it at 10:10 when your watch looks the best, but for some reason or another, the shenanigans of a family of five always get in the way during the weekend, and I get on just a little late. During the week, I think I'm going to be able to nail 10:10 going forward, because it feels really good to be here at 10:10. I get out of the bed really fast. There's not a long delay between when I'm ready to go and when I'm going to go. 1 o'clock always felt like I was ready to go by 10 and I wasn't going, and so then I had to figure out how to work on the next day's stream while still being ready to go with this one. And so 10:10 is working great. Today, again, like I said, waffles and things get in the way. But I'm ready to go. Intramuscular injection of any combination of substances with the intent of augmenting the immune system is dumb. Transfection in healthy humans is criminally negligent, and RNA cannot pandemic. If you need to understand any of this biology because you're curious or because you think, wow, how can he string those words together and make any sense? You should tune into other streams that I've done. You can find that on Twitch. You can find it on my own PeerTube website. You can find it, some of them on Rumble. Some of them have been on YouTube. And I'm basically speaking to YouTube right now because I'm rarely here. And it seems like we at least have some viewers on YouTube, which is kind of nice. The hypothesis running on this broadcast that has been formulated and fine-tuned over the last couple years is that the WHO declared a pandemic of a particularly dangerous novel virus, but it's likely that the tests were neither specific for a particular virus, nor were they accurate at picking up something in the background, but instead either a combination of noise and pre-existing signal was misconstrued as spread. And because of the nature of the media campaign and the spectacular commitment to a universal, almost universal set of lies, they were able to convince the healthcare conglomerates of, everybody runs hospitals and doctors and TV programs and schools and nursing homes, all that something very significant was happening when in fact it wasn't. And you could consider it more like a fire drill where everybody's committed to executing the fire drill even when they find out that they didn't need to call the fire department, or even worse, that maybe somebody on the inside wanted to run a drill and so then pulled the fire alarm, fully knowing that the people at the school were going to act like there was a fire and that the fire department was going to respond like there was a fire. And so if in the end the entire school got soaked in foam and some of the kids were killed because of the way that the fire department rushed in to try and save them, then that would be part of the drill and they would learn from it. And if you think of the pandemic more like that, more like something that has been gamed out over several other exercises, both tabletop and real, and as being sort of the fruits of this operation are being reaped by many different, maybe even competing interests and competing weaponized piles of money, all under the agreement that we're going to agree to lie or look the other way about what we all know, wink, wink, is a national security operation, and therefore lying about stuff is okay. And the worst part about it is that I think that they put people out there already in 2020 with very specific parts of a truth narrative, and told them to stick to it so that none of us would be able to accurately assemble what was really going on because of this coordinated symphony of liars. And it wasn't just Tony Fauci and Rand Paul arguing about lab leak. It wasn't just, Peter Daszak and Ralph Baric. It isn't just the NIH. It isn't just the DOD. It isn't just one entity. First and foremost, we should think about who moves things in our world, and that is weaponized piles of money and the men and women that control those weaponized piles of money. And then after that, it might be the corporations that those weaponized piles of money can influence and move around. And then maybe it might be the governments that can do the same things. Then you might think of the large investment banks as having something to do with it because they are intertwined with these private equity firms / weaponized piles of money. But governments that can print their own money ad infinitum are also kind of weaponized piles of money, aren't they now? Banks that can engage in fractional reserve banking is definitely a form of weaponized money. And so these are the interests that they don't want us to think about. Instead, they wanted us to solve a Scooby-Doo mystery about a lab leak, which got us all to assume the presuppositions of the narrative, which is that there was a lab leak, that RNA can pandemic. And Gigaohm Biological has been teaching consistently for more than 2 years that it's likely that RNA, no matter what special furin cleavage site or what special homology with staphylococcus and enterotoxin B or whatever homologies with HIV GP120 have been inserted into a hypothetical gain-of-function spike protein that would not endow an RNA encoding it to encircle the globe and infect all zoo populations and all the wildlife in America. No way. That's just a mythology. And if we go pre-2020, there's actually no academic papers demonstrating that that's even remotely a possibility. There are papers that use the word pandemic, that use the words pandemic and potential in combination repeatedly, even use it in the title. But none of those papers represent a set of observations which edifies the idea that a pandemic of an RNA in a mud puddle can occur at all. And so it is very likely, after many, many years of trying to convince us that this biological threat exists both in bat caves and in laboratories, and soon in even the garages of endeavorous biological, amateurs, that we need to surrender all of our sovereignty over to these people so that we can get to the transhuman perfection that people like Ray Kurzweiler has told us are going to come in between 10 and 15 years, where there will be no disease, where there will be no death, where we will live forever if we want to, or some people will. And this mythology that's coming in the future is really just one contiguous intellectual mythology that extends all the way back to the special cancer virus program and goes through the AIDS crisis and goes through the chronic fatigue syndrome circuses that repeated more than once, we've found out very recently, not just Judy Mikovits, but one person before that, thanks to Mark Husatonic, Mark Husatonic Live, who's already had one YouTube channel canceled. But when you go on YouTube to look for somebody like Robert Malone, there are hundreds of videos. But he's supposedly censored. If you go look for videos of Brett Weinstein, who apparently is just terrible, they're everywhere. But if Mark Husatonic with Mark Kulak with a few thousand subscribers does a video about Hillary Kaprowski, he gets a strike. Strange world we live in, ladies and gentlemen, unless you see that it's just a gigantic national security operation that hasn't ended. It's ongoing. And everything that lives on YouTube is an admission, because what couldn't live on YouTube and what does live on YouTube is very important. And it is not that the censorship is changing, it is that the story is progressing. And I think the best way to say it is that they need all the pigs in the cage. And so they keep needing to put more of the truth out there so that more of us will go, yeah, see, there we go. I knew it. That guy's got it. And then they can close the cage. And they're not there yet. I think the only way they're going to get the rest of us in the cage is with pain. And that's why I think we need to be very vigilant, and we need to keep working hard to wake up as many young people as possible, because that's the rift I think they're counting on, is that the young people will be on board, and the young people will be even angrier with us this time around, whatever it is. It doesn't have to be disease X. It can also be election fraud X, or assassination X, or any number of grid down scenarios that then result in some kind of, drama that then has a limited spectrum of debate that everybody's focused on. And now we've run out another year of the clock. And then the food supply next year and the inflation next year is double what it is this year. And so even more people are suffering, and even more people are losing their houses to big banks. And now we're into 2027. And maybe at that point, we'll be talking about how actually we should have called this transfection all along, and that there are a lot more people injured than we realize. And boy, the American government is one shitty place. And then we're almost to 2028. And the controlled demolition of America, and by proxy, all of the whatever's left of the republics of the West will be destroyed by essentially the people that live there, because the people that live there all around the world are being confused by fear and contradictory narratives. I'm very, very optimistic that our children are going to be able to pull out of this nosedive, but I'm not very optimistic that the current crop of adults that we have now is going to be able to do it. I think we should try, but even if we get them, I don't think we're going to get where we need to go. That's why I think we need to focus on people that are younger than us. We need to focus on young people and getting more young people to be able to express this message, express the message that we have been lied to by a symphony of coordinated liars who have accepted the role of perpetuating the potential for a worst case scenario so that compliance would be maximum. And so that absurd video of Bill Gates that's going around right now, where he says we're pretty much going to try mRNA on every vaccine that's already in existence, and all the things that we've ever wanted to make a vaccine from, we're just going to try it with RNA too. At least that's what we're going to invest in, because it's so cheap to make. And it's, in a way, it makes perfect sense, because these narratives, in order to create the chaos that's necessary, have to continue to move farther apart. They have to keep doubling down on, yeah, it was natural, and of course it's going to come again, and of course vaccines are the best thing ever. And these people have to keep doubling down on the fact that, no, it was a lab leak. It was worse. It could be even worse next time. Next time it could be 1 billion people. But also they're lying about these shots, so we got to be very careful. Maybe it's just ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine and zinc that we should all stock up on. And so they've all got to double down in order to keep the fracture progressing deeper. And there are some other, as we've seen, some other disarming satellite stories. Yesterday and the day before, I think, were 2 extremely exceptional study halls that really brought home what I have been trying to bring home for a long time.
Morbidity. I want people to complain. So what do? I go to Des Moines. Ladies and gentlemen and people on the screen, I have nothing against Des Moines. I lived there for 4 years. I go to Des Moines. I infect a couple of sentinel cases in Des Moines. I go to Seattle. I infect a couple of cases there. I go to North Carolina. I go to Wisconsin. What I'm doing is I'm using a dispersion methodology to be able to infect sentinel cases with a highly morbid condition. These individuals complain. Again, this is essential.
Now, the reason why this is important, of course, is because Dr. Giordano is explaining how the illusion of a pandemic could be created using a toxin. The whole context of this is that he's not going to release an agent that is contagious. It's not an agent that's contagious. It doesn't spread. And in fact, he doesn't want that. What he wants is people to complain. He wants a couple people in all these places to complain. And then the weapon he's going to use is the internet. He's going to tell people that there's asymptomatic spread. He characterizes that as something else in this video, like what does he call it? It's something about syndrome. I'll go back.
System banging on the door. The CDC comes back and says, nonsense. That's not.
So I don't know if I can do it. Let me see. Is it going to let me go back?
Real. I come back and say, that's fake news.
Maybe it'll let me do it. Okay, yes, here we go. I'm just going to run it again because I want to hear the whole thing.
Morbidity. I want people to complain. So what do? I go to Des Moines. Ladies and gentlemen and people on the screen, I have nothing against Des Moines. I lived there for 4 years.
Oh, you. Sorry, guys. I am
What I want is high
a
morbidity.
bumbler.
I want people to complain. So what do? I go to Des Moines. Ladies and gentlemen and people on the screen, I have nothing against Des Moines. I lived there for 4 years. I go to Des Moines. I infect a couple of sentinel cases in Des Moines. I go to Seattle. I infect a couple of cases there. I go to North Carolina. I go to Wisconsin. What I'm doing is I'm using a dispersion methodology to be able to infect sentinel cases with a highly morbid condition. These individuals complain. Again, this is a central nervous system condition. So they're complaining of whatever the bug may do. It'll produce some cascade of neurological and neuropsychiatric signs and symptoms. And then what I do, the real bug that I use is the internet. I take attribution for that. Yes, I'm a terrorist group. And
now, one of the things you have to remember is that it's a little more impressive during the pandemic. This is from 2017. The pandemic that we experienced, the real bug they used was the internet, was also to have all kinds of people already engaged in speculation about what the worst case scenario was. And they got people to engage in speculation about the worst case scenario by seeding a narrative of a lab leak and the potential for a cover-up. And once you seed that narrative with people who agree with each other that, wow, I mean, if this is a lab leak, then it could be much worse. And the numbers like R naught of 16 would be totally feasible. I mean, if they engineered it, who knows? And there were people talking like that. And not just they had those people talking like that because, as I've stated in previous streams, a lot of the people on this screen had no business knowing what they knew when they knew it, or saying what they said when they said it, unless they were queued up to do so. To make sure that not only were these ideas present very early and associated with the virus, but they could be sustained by these people as being first on the scene with this idea. And particularly, I'm talking about the fear and cleavage site, because the list of people and when they talked about the fear and cleavage site is so suspect at this point, because not one of them, in my humble opinion, has turned out to be a legitimate dissident and trying to fight against the illusion of a pandemic, but rather, after 4 years, has painted a very consistent picture of behavior, which suggests that all along their job was to create and maintain the story of potentially a worst case scenario that includes a disease that might resemble flying AIDS. And the people that proposed that this might be the case early on in 2020, some of them are still saying it's going to come. And it's a very parallel story to what Geert van den Bosch is talking about right now, which is a story that he started telling in January of 21. And for a while, I thought that he was the only one who was telling the truth, and it was the thing that I pushed in my review, was that we could potentially cause a disaster if there's any antibody-dependent enhancement, or if we influence the evolution of the virus that at that time I still thought was circulating. That I had become convinced again by a lot of meddlers that my idea in 2020 in May and June and July that they were lying about a background was ridiculous. And it was a lot of people that convinced me of that. A lot of people worked very hard to convince me that that stance was ridiculous, which is now my stance again. Because I've been able to, over a consistent period of time, identify extremely inconsistent behavior in a lot of the people on this screen. Not Sukrit Bhakti, not Nick Hudson, not Mike Eden, not Wolfgang Wodach, not really even Denny Rancor, not even really Peter McCullough. Peter McCullough does stay consistent on early treatment and on virus and on COVID-19. So yes, that's why he's over here. Zev Zelenko's gone. Bobby Kennedy spoke out in October about the lockdowns being wrong and about public health being a disaster and about them wanting to give us digital IDs and stuff like that. And he wasn't wrong about that. But he also has sold a book saying that this is a gain-of-function virus that was a leak and then covered up, and that Fauci and all these people are the Scooby-Doo mystery solved. We have over here Pierre Corey, who has sold a book about ivermectin. We have right next to him Brett Weinstein, who came out in June of 2021 to say that he had the secret sauce of ivermectin that allowed him to prophylactically avoid COVID, and that if everybody took it for 30 days, him and Steve Kirsch agreed that we could all reach zero COVID, as in the virus would be gone. This is Kevin McCairn in Japan, who said in 2020 that 1 billion people could die, and it might be the worst case scenario, so we should make masks and a longer lockdown. Was already on the spike protein as a gain-of-function research, as evidence of gain-of-function research, and was very early on talking about how amyloidosis and preonogenesis might be engineered into this protein, even though he's never spent any time at all teaching people what that means in the context of biology. What is a prion, and what does it do? And how would they take that and put it into a fusion protein of a virus? Nothing at all. How does amyloidosis work on a systemic level? And how would they engineer that into the protein? Nothing at all. Just vague details about some modeling that they did, or some algorithm that they used to identify these sequences, or some in vitro experiment that they did in a dish which caused some kind of change or some kind of aggregate protein to form. Coming up with magnificent tales that try to tell a story about some particular aspects of transfection being criminally negligent into a special aspect of a special protein that was made by specially bad people. Instead of them just lying about transfection being a good alternative to the other crap that they used to inject into our children. They want you to believe that they put a special protein in you and that's why it didn't work, or that the protein wasn't pure, or that the RNA wasn't pure, or that maybe it was the double-stranded DNA in there that's causing all this trouble, instead of just the fact that transfection in its purest form would have been bad and remains so. Unless you have cancer, maybe then it helps. And the crazy part about Robert Malone, for example, who a lot of people still think he's a hero, is that, you know what's really weird that's no one's pointed out until right now, because no one's trying to figure this out really, is that what is actually strange is that he tells the story over and over again. I just heard it again while I was shooting around with Jay Bhattacharya on the Illusion of Consensus podcast. Isn't that weird? Robert Malone regales him with the story that he threw away his career once already. And by throwing away his career, he means that he got 3 articles in the New York Times where he was interviewed about his expertise in transformation, that is, using adenovirus carrying a gene to treat a genetic disorder. And after those articles, he claims that he lost his career. But what happened was he was given a breast cancer institute somewhere else, which is not exactly losing your career. And the funny thing about that story is that, again, remember, I remind you, Jesse Gelsinger died of an adenovirus, basically, that was injected into him to give his liver a protein that it didn't have. And the immunological consequences of that were liver failure, because his immune system attacked his liver acutely, because you can't express a protein that's not your own in the liver and expect the immune system to ignore it. The lipid nanoparticle did exactly what it was supposed to do. It went right to the liver, because that's where it goes after it floats around wherever the hell it wants to. A lot of them go to the liver, maybe up to 70%. And so in reality, that's where probably a lot of spike protein is expressed in a lot of people as well. And so liver damage is also something that's very possible, I think. But with regard to this, they had especially, it killed him acutely. And so Robert Malone claims, this guy over here, one of these people claims that one of the, sort of evidence of his 20-year career of being a golden lion of bioethics is that he was the one who blew the whistle on Jesse Gelsinger. You could also see it as he's the one who controlled the limited spectrum of debate about how people would talk about this. And it turns out that one of the stories that's really central is that they went off protocol and gave him a higher dose because they believed so much in the therapy. And so the argument is kind of weird, because he's not saying that the adenovirus didn't work. He's saying that the scientists were unethical because they went off the protocol and gave him more and a higher dose than they had planned or had written down. And he makes a big story about how he had to consult with his bioethics friend to decide whether he had the obligation to come forward, and then he did. And then he even makes fun of the ethics guy, because apparently that ethics guy started an ethics institute with Jesse's dad, and that makes him have conflicts of interest. But unlike Robert Malone, he just chose the high road. Well, after that long story, is it really weird then that when the first vaccine that came out in the UK was an adenovirus-based vaccine encoding a spike protein, that he didn't speak out immediately, because he said, well, I did this 10 years ago already. Adenovirus doesn't work like that. Holy shit, are you going to give people adenovirus that expresses a spike protein? I already lost my career once speaking out against this idea. You can't do that in healthy humans. He didn't at all. He was silent. In fact, you can find videos of him talking in 2021 about the highly vaccinated population in the UK being a possible source of, isn't that an interesting oversight? Maybe he should have spoke out against the AAV before the mRNA was even hitting the market. He should have already said, whoa, wait a minute. I was in the New York Times 3 times a decade ago talking about how bad this is. You can't possibly think this is the right way to go. Are you crazy? These lipid nanoparticles go to the liver. Are you guys nuts? Don't you see it now, ladies and gentlemen? And that's what happened with almost all of the people that are on one diagonal of this picture or another. And it's only the people in the middle here, like Sukrit Bhakti, Mike Yeadon, Nick Hudson, Wolfgang Wodak, Denny Rancor, and myself, and Mark Kulak, and Jessica Hockett that are here not believing in a lab leak, not believing in a natural bat cave virus, not arguing that there's nothing there and that it's all water or something. There are no pathogens. There's, flip-flopping between arguing very succinctly about the weaknesses of coronavirus biology and then pivoting right away to any number of ridiculous statements. It's no different than what Tucker Carlson does. It's no different than what Alex Jones has been doing. Alex Jones has made it completely impossible to question the Sandy Hook narrative. Alex Jones has made it completely impossible to take anything to do with the Bohemian Grove seriously. Alex Jones has made it impossible for half of the country to accept any of the truths that he may have revealed mixed in with his circus show. And once you see that someone like Robert Malone, as early as last week or this week, can go on Alex Jones and call him a hero and somebody who can see around corners, how can we not assume that we are being played by all of these people, collectively governed by their bullshit? They all agree that there was a virus that killed millions of people, but millions more were saved imperfectly. And they all agree that viruses will come again. It's just a question of will they be gain of function, or can we be lucky enough that they'll only be natural ones? And even these people above my head, the last 2 days, if you haven't been able to be convinced that some of them or their advisors are keeping them exactly where they need to be in order to make sure that this position in the middle, which is occupied by people who say that we are just being lied to, occupied by the position of people that believe that they intended to deceive us so that we would believe transfection worked, so that they could protect this bunk vaccine schedule that they've been using on us for decades, that they could protect the illusion that public health is. And that's the exact reason why yesterday's stream was so valuable, because that's the revelation that I was so able to so succinctly put out right in the middle of that stream. If those people up there wanted this to end in 2020, they could have said there are no viruses, they don't test for them, they don't do controls, and what the conclusion you must come to then is that people are being murdered in order to create the illusion of this spread. People are being killed, and maybe they only had to kill people in New York City and only had to lie about people dying in New York City before these people and these people over there and these people down here all had the anecdotal evidence that they needed to go all in on their part of the narrative, all in on their part of the narrative alone. VAERS, early treatment in ivermectin, natural virus versus lab leak, the danger of Delta or not danger of Delta. Would it surprise you that in 2021 in August that you can find videos on YouTube that haven't been canceled where Robert Malone is talking about the virulence of Delta and leaked CDC documents that describe an R0 of 8 for Delta? It shouldn't surprise you, because he was part of the theater which made sure that, again, just like Dr. Giordano said, the internet was a source of misinformation that would make sure that the presuppositions of the narrative were completely supported no matter which direction you went. And if you went up into the upper corner over here, and the game is still going on. That's why the story of a lot of these people over here hasn't really changed, right? That's why the story of all these people down here definitely hasn't changed. And you will see a very similar pattern of not changing up here. And in fact, what's really cool about what we saw in the video yesterday is how little they're actually able to discuss. And it is that inability to summarize across lies. Like, if virology is a lie, then what else is a lie? Explain it. Why not in one time or another repeat over and over again that if virology is a lie, then vaccines are a lie? Why don't they say that? Why don't they say what I said last night, that, America was so unhealthy and so bad, and virology can't do this, so they must have done something else, and New York is very suspicious, and think of how far they could have been by now. Think about how far they could have been in 2023, and think about how far some of the other organizations that I've been inside of and helped advise, and some of the books that I've helped write or fact check, could have had this more eloquently or succinctly or clearly present, that this possibility that RNA can't pandemic, that pandemics don't exist in RNA virology, and that they have, after many years of fuddling around with them, trying to make something transmissible, I assume, is one interesting goal. I don't know, ladies and gentlemen, other than to know that almost everyone that I have on this corner, on this side of the screen over here, and all the people up in this corner, some reason or another, are just not able to have progressed very much in their understanding or what they can ask questions and think about. And they have all made a sort of weirdly concerted effort not to understand the big picture, not to understand how we could easily come together, despite the fact that we might disagree about some things. We can come together about the fact that they've lied to us and agree that certain things are really awful, but they don't want to do that. They don't want to do that. They don't want to do that by design. Because these are all independent, limited spectrums of debate in which, if you are trapped, it's very, very difficult to get out. Because each one of these groups represents a group of people that within which are coordinated liars. And so if all of these people agree to kind of lie about the shortcomings of virology and the shortcomings of public health and the shortcomings of our fidelity and understanding of HIV, then we don't stand much of a chance. If all of these people up here are willing to coordinatedly lie about the presence of a lab-leaked virus, and that the relevance of thinking about the evolution of it, the relevance of thinking about censorship or mandates, rather than questioning the existence of an RNA with the capability of causing a pandemic from a mud puddle, even the people that purport to be very skilled, multi-field biologists like Jessica Rose or Robert Malone or Brett Weinstein, or maybe even serial entrepreneur Steve Kirsch, none of these people seem to have the intellectual depth to get to the point where they can say why RNA can't pandemic is a dumb statement, other than, well, look at the GEDSED database. None of them can seem to overcome the problem of infectious clones, except to try and say infectious clones either don't do anything or do the same thing. None of them can get to the point where they can succinctly describe the hypothesis I'm putting forth and then offer an alternative that kind of purports to refute it or shows the weaknesses of it. If you just keep repeating APOBEC all the time, or keep repeating there's a gene called XON that's proofreading in coronaviruses, and it's not 10 to the 6th, it's 10 to the 4th or something like that, that's not sufficient. It's sufficient for Twitter, it's sufficient for skilled social media users, and that's the problem. And so until we are able to get enough people aware of how the symphony of lying is accomplished, and it doesn't have to be all members of this choir. Many of the members of this choir may be comfortably naive, have chosen to remain ignorant. Even more likely, they probably just aren't clever enough to know. And it's very hard when multiple people are lying to you and agreeing to do so. It's very difficult. And I humbly submit that one of the reasons why it took me until 2024 to be able to so succinctly use this video from Dr. Giordano to explain what really happened and why this coordinated symphony of lies also progresses. It just progresses very much slowly, very much more slowly than we could have had we listened to the right people in 2020. If we'd listened to all the right people in 2020, we would be right where we are right now, probably already in May. But because we listened to this cacophony, and because the internet and its programming elevated this cacophony while suppressing or completely, essentially deleting anyone who had progressed farther than that, and then carefully controlled it and got these people in front of those people so that they felt like they were making progress. Finally, they said my name. The ball's moving forward, but it's not. You're on a school bus and you think you're going on a field trip, but actually you're being kidnapped. And some of the people on the bus are actually in on it, and the rest of the people are being kidnapped. But some of the kids that got on the bus are getting on the bus knowing that they're not going into slave labor at the end of this. They're going to go pick up another group of kids. They're in on it. And that's what a lot of these people, not Mike Yeadon, not Nick Hudson, not I don't think Sukrit Bhakti, I don't think Wolfgang Wodak, I don't think Zev Zelenko was in on it, I don't think Denny Rancor, or I don't think they are in on it. I'm worried about Peter McCullough only because every time I've interacted with him, every time I watch him on screen, I feel it's someone under duress. And I don't get that feeling with a lot of other people. But with Dr. McCullough, I really feel like he may know that some of the things he says are essentially part of a worst case scenario. He may know more than he's willing to say. And his track record would reveal that, right? Because he came out very early. He needed to be co-opted. He was coming out about hydroxychloroquine and how these trials were dumb and how talking about swollen hearts was ridiculous because he had a technician that had held more hearts in her hand than anyone else. And so this was just a ridiculous notion. And so he needed to be co-opted. And it may be that some of these other people were co-opted that were meaning well, but then also the narrative controllers, the national security operations saw them as potential epi-girls and so co-opted them. And in so doing, they have risen faster than the legitimate people that they stand in front of. And by that definition, they then control the narrative that they stand in front of, and they can slow roll it. The people behind them can be shouting, yeah, but tell them this, tell them this. That was me. Brett, please, Brett, we just used the word transfection. And we're in 2024, and he still kind of every once in a while uses it. Some people do, but I've been saying since 2020, if you just called it transfection, it would like enable so many people and spur so many people to think differently. And they all didn't do it. And I thought because they were listening, or I was on a Signal chat with them, or that I got an email, that they were listening. And they did that to everyone. You see, there were hundreds of people doing this. I'm sure there are hundreds of people that are not here that were also doing it because the internet is that way. We don't see everything. We see our own little bubble over here and bubble. And these bubbles were repeated. These schemes were repeated. They were repeated in every country that they have internet in. I'm sure in every language there were people like this that were representing both narratives. I bet if I moved to the Netherlands and tried hard, I could find it within 10 minutes. And those people, some of them were witting participants working for the globalists or whatever they're called, and some people were just trying to do the right thing, and as a result of the coordinated symphony of liars, they got co-opted, they got tricked, they got duped into running in a hamster wheel and getting their followers to run in a hamster wheel. And as a result, we're now in 2024 and still very few people understand or have heard what Mike Yeadon has to say. Few people have heard what Wolfgang Wodak really has to say. Very few people have heard what Zev Zelenko had to say or what Sukrit Bhakti had to say. But lots and lots of people, ladies and gentlemen, on YouTube, there are videos available to find out what Robert Malone said from August 2000, June 2020, and before. Heck, you can even find a video of him speaking in front of the WHO in 2011 already. So the real censorship that has occurred is still occurring. The real narrative control is still occurring. What you need to become aware of and savvy with is the idea that the actual control of the narrative still has to progress in order to release the pressure that builds up behind the dam. And where we are right now is that the pressure is beyond containment. We have pushed past their narrative now. And we're exposing it for what it is, because now you can see it very clearly. If this group of people and the last two videos make sense to you, and the previous 3 years of work that I've done sorting out this and this over there, and keep coming back to Mr. Sparkle, and Nick Hudson was just on Russell Brand and did a pretty good job. And I think just by his language and the things that he said, you can hear Gigaohm Biological and everything he said, even if he didn't give us a shout out. And I wish he would have, but I'm not going to hold him. I'm not going to begrudge him that. He shouted out Jessica, which I'm happy about, because I do think New York City is a way for people that are asleep to go, whoa, what is that? Wait, I didn't know it was like that. I didn't see those numbers before. And in fact, they didn't show us those numbers in 2020. They showed us those numbers now. And so it's, again, you have to do the work to look backwards. If you're not willing to look backwards because of all the noise in the front of the car, then, you're never going to, you missed it already. And that's the point of keeping the gas down. They don't want you to see what you've passed. They don't want you to think about that stuff. And they definitely don't want you to think about what these people said in 2020, what these people were doing in 2020. And they definitely don't want you to think about it too hard, because then you will see the contradiction. You will see their lack of principles. And you will see that they have never, ever questioned the faith, not since the beginning of the pandemic. And the only reason why I haven't been consistent in my message in retrospect is because of how many people tried to get me to accept what they were thinking. And that's what I think happened to you as well. You got a lot of people who have convinced you to accept the way that they think.
I have done this by infecting.
And so today, I wanted to do a little bit, I titled it again, Anti-Academagic Hour. And so this is not really about viruses or anything like that. Actually, this is about our friend Jordan Peterson, the genius that said he's wearing the masks and he advises everybody to take the shot so we can get this over with, even though he would never coerce anybody to doing it. And he says, let's not ask any questions for 6 more months and see how it goes, because it's going pretty well. It could have been much worse. This mealy mouth poser, intellectual dark web founding member, is responsible for millions of people being too confused to exercise informed consent. He decapitalized the people that listened to him, and he's continuing to play that role now. This video is from 4 months ago, where he's interviewing a guy about AI and imaging technology. The reason why this is cool is because they're going to basically reveal something about training an AI that many people try to gloss over as being significant, especially with regard to the idea of AI working on genetics or working on protein folding or working on any of these other things. It is absolutely extraordinary what gets revealed in this video. It's just, you need a little help probably to see it. Not all of you will, but some people will need a little help seeing it. So I tried to find clips of Jordan saying those things and had no luck anywhere. Let me give you a little help with that first. So what I would do first of all is go like this, and go to YouTube. And then if we go to my watch history, I think it's right here. If you go to this video
and didn't say,
and I'll just give you this clip in the chat. A lot of those videos of Jordan have been removed. This is a video archived by my friend Mark on his channel, where I work on that Robert Malone in the, see this, on the beach. And in the beginning of this video, I actually also dissect what Jordan Peterson says, and I lose my mind a little bit on that. So you can check that out. So I'm gonna play this video off of YouTube, which means I'm gonna end my YouTube stream. So all of the people who are watching on YouTube, if you could go to Twitch or PeerTube or Rumble, that would be great. I'm only doing that because I know what happens when I play from YouTube and then stream to it. It goes very wrong. So it's just a lot better if I don't do that. And so thank you very much for joining me. It has been an hour, so it's a good time to end the YouTube channel. And we're going to now do things and say things that I guess YouTube won't like, although they probably didn't like a lot of the things we said already. Thanks for joining me. See you again.